And I'll call to order the meeting of the Ag Finance and Policy Committee. This meeting will be held in accordance with House Rule 10.01. Roll call, Mr. Smith.
Chair Sundin.
Here.
Vice Chair Vang.
Present.
Representative Anderson. Representative Burkle.
Burkle present.
Representative Eklund.
Present.
Representative Hanson R. Representative Hanson J.
Hanson J. Present.
Representative Klevorn.
Klevorn present.
Representative Lippert.
Lippert present.
Representative Lewick.
Lewick present.
Representative Miller.
Miller present.
Representative Nelson.
Nelson present.
Representative Thompson. We have a quorum, Mr. Chair.
Council President.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Okay, we have the minutes of the meeting on February 23rd. Chair Vang, have you reviewed these minutes, and do you have a motion for us?
Yes, Mr. Chair. So I move the meeting minutes for February 23rd, 2022.
Are there any questions or corrections? Seeing none, hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, the motion prevails. The minutes are adopted. We have 4 bills on the agenda today. We'll need to, one will need to be moved out to another committee, and the remaining 3 are all fiscal. They'll be laid over for possible inclusion in a supplemental finance bill. I think we have adequate time blocked for each bill, but given the number of people signed up, I'm going to remind everyone to keep their questions and comments after brief, so we can all get through the agenda. First up, we have Representative Haley with House File 2168. Welcome to the committee, Representative Haley. We have a target time of about 20 minutes on this bill. So this bill crosses multiple committee jurisdictions, and it will make several stops. So let's keep our discussion focused on issues of the Ag, Finance, and Policy Committee jurisdiction only. So Representative Anderson, would you like to move 2168?
Mr. Chair, yes, I would. Thank you.
Yeah, that would be recommended and referred to the Committee on Commerce, Finance, and Policy. So that is Representative Anderson's motion. Representative Anderson, there's also an author's amendment. Would you like to move the H2168A1 amendment for Representative Haley?
Mr. Chair, yes, I move that amendment.
Okay. Representative Haley, please explain that amendment, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to hear this bill this afternoon. The amendment simply updates the bill. I had introduced this previously, and we updated the dates from 2021 to 2022.
Okay, any questions on to the author of the amendment? Okay, seeing none, hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. The bill as amended is now before us. Representative Haley, please tell us about your bill specifically as it relates to agriculture and the ag budget, and then let's hear from your witnesses.
Thank you, Chair Sundin, and thank you, members of the Ag Committee. This bill, House File 2168, establishes a Minnesota Grape and Wine Council. This industry has been growing and developing across our state for a number of years. And I'd like to really just turn it over to my testifiers to give you the background on that and the reason for the bill. I believe that John Howe would be going first with the Minnesota Grape Growers Council.
Mr. Howe, would you please identify yourself for the committee and proceed with your testimony?
Ellenbecker. We'll just start if you wouldn't mind. I see John Howe is not on. So thank you,
Okay.
Chairman and representatives, for giving us this opportunity.
Is this Jenny Becker? Jenny
Yes.
Ellen Becker? Okay.
Jenny Ellenbecker.
Okay, identify yourself in your title, please.
I am owner of Round Lake Vineyards and Winery and the Minnesota Grape Growers president.
Great, thank you. Go ahead with your testimony.
No.
And I'm, you can't see me because of the silhouette. I'm Scott Ellenbecker, her husband, and also co-owner of the Round Lake Vineyards and Winery. And so I was going to go over the positions we have it. There is a, currently, when we ship wine in the state of Minnesota, there's a 6.875 tax on the shipment. And liquor tax is 2.5%. And when wine is shipped in from out of state, there is no tax. So to make it equal and fair, this puts us at an unfair advantage. So we want to make it equal and fair and tax wine coming into the state and level the playing field and use this money to promote the Minnesota wine industry, something that other states are doing. And it has brought up the level of awareness, education, and grown the farming of grapes in other states. We'd also use this to help grow the extension and put more grapes in. When we started this business 15 years ago, there was a lot of small farmers, 1 or 2 acres. Today, we just came from our convention in Rochester. Many of the wineries are 10, 15, 20, up to 60 acres of grapes growing in Minnesota vineyards. So we want to use the money that would be from the tax to increase the awareness, extension, and marketing of Minnesota, the Minnesota wine and grape industry.
And just a little note from when we started growing in 2006. Yes, we had our employees, we only had like 10 to 13 employees. Right now, our winery as itself, I think we have 12 full-time employees and we're up to 55 to 60 part-time employees. So that's giving us a growth throughout. So with this, we do need to grow and promote like New York has done and has just expanded. We have done some economic impacts of the wine and grape industry and how it affects agritourism. But without having any funding or money, we can't update that status. So we haven't had an updated since 2016 status and summary of what the vineyards and wineries contribute to in Minnesota. It is a $1 million industry across the whole ag and tourism aspect.
Is that it from the Ellenbecker family?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, is John Hall with us at this point?
Yeah, I think my chairman, my mic might have been muted. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you just fine. Please identify yourself for the record and go ahead with your testimony.
John Howe from Red Wing, Minnesota. Thank you, Chairman and representatives and staff for the opportunity to testify on behalf of House File 2168. What we're trying to do is establish a wine council, and it's have an inclusive list. If you look at the bill of who we're including in that wine council, but currently we have a statute that up to 2 cases of wine direct ship to consumers from out of state. We don't track it. They don't collect sales tax. There's no excise tax. And so, you know, I think they're looking at expanding that even from 2 cases up to like 12 cases. But we actually have no idea in the state of Minnesota how much direct to consumer shipment of wines, out of state wines, are coming into our state. Now, last year in the first special session, you know, we were collecting because of, the lawsuit was settled with this internet tax collection. Shippers have just been automatically collecting some tax on wine sales and remitting it to the Department of Revenue, even though it wasn't authorized to be collected. So they made a change to say that it authorizes the department to collect tax, but doesn't require it. I think we really need to tighten that loophole, because I don't know why we would say, hey, if you want to pay the tax, you can, but we're not going to require a tax. And it really isn't fair to our businesses in Minnesota, like the Ellenbeckers who have the Round Lake Winery. They have to have a license. They have to be licensed by the state. They have to collect the tax, and even when they ship it. And so this really is about making sure that our Minnesota grape growers, our wineries, are on the same level footing as out-of-state growers and wineries. And our idea with that was to take some of the revenue or the revenue generated from, and at least to understand how many cases of wine are being direct to ship to consumers in our state. We have no idea. So this would create a licensing program for out-of-state shippers. It could be handled right through the shipping companies. And it would also promote through the Department of Ag or the Commissioner of Ag, a grant program to help educate and promote the grape growing industry and the wine industry in the state of Minnesota. Now, I did talk to Commissioner Peterson, and the department is very supportive of it. I don't know if he has anybody at this hearing today. He said he would try to, but I did talk to him personally about this bill, and he is supportive of this.
Okay, terrific. Any questions or comments from the committee? Questions to the author or to testifiers? Yeah, I see Representative Miller, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to keep to the heart of what you said about agriculture. A lot of my questions are about these tax increases. So I'll try to keep that. I assume this is going to be heading the tax committee eventually, but if you could give me just a little bit of latitude so that I can understand this bill. I won't get into the heart of the taxes, but just a couple questions. So the way I read this bill, I have a person who grows grapes and produces and sells wine in my district. What you're saying, if I understand properly, this tax increase does not affect his sales, or it does affect his sales?
Does not affect his sales.
Okay,
The person in Minnesota.
Mr. Ellenbecker. Go ahead, Mr. Ellenbecker.
Done, fine.
Chair,
This,
Chair Sundin, that was representative, or that was John Howe who was.
Oh, I'm sorry.
responding.
Mr. Hall, please.
The fact of the matter is the wineries in Minnesota are paying this tax. So what this does is it requires out-of-state shippers, out-of-state growers to be on the same level playing field as our in-state growers. So in essence, our in-state people are paying this, but the people who ship wine from out of state are exempt.
Okay, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair.
Miller, please. Okay, who's first? Nancy, did you have something? Representative Miller,
No,
please.
Mr. Chair, that was Representative Haley.
Oh, Representative Miller, you had a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, thank you. And I know this gets a little bit confusing with Zoom. I'm looking forward to the day that we're no longer doing these on Zoom.
Right.
So I appreciate your patience. So I'd like to see the tax removed from the people in Minnesota, but be that as it may, that's again for the tax committee. The way I also read this, I have one more question and a really quick statement, I promise, Mr. Chair. So my next question is again, when I read this, I see the wine producers in Minnesota, and then it talks about the $50 fee later on in this bill, and you're joining the wine council. Are the wine producers, are the grape growers and the wine producers in Minnesota, are they going to be compelled to join this the wine
Council.
Wine council.
I have the wrong word stuck in my head, sorry, the wine advisory council?
It looks
The
like
way I read it is they are going to be compelled, like they have to
Yep.
join it.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chairman and Mr. Chairman and
Hang
Representative.
on a second. I've got a handful of hands up here. So
Okay.
Is that Mr. Howell?
Yes.
You're not, there you are. Okay, Mr. Howell, please.
Chairman and Representative Miller, no one's going to be compelled to join any organization or anything like that. All we're doing is, and I wholeheartedly agree with you. If you can get the taxes removed and the licensing requirements removed from Minnesota wineries and grape growers, I'd absolutely support that. That's another direction we can go. but I don't think you're going to get that job done because I don't think anywhere in the state of Minnesota, you're going to be able to sell a bottle of wine over the counter and not have it taxed and not have excise tax. So what this bill does is say, hey, if you're out of state shipping direct, and this is big business, we have no idea, absolutely no idea if we're talking about $100,000 or $1 million on this, or $10 million, because no one tracks it currently.
Okay. Thank you. Representative Miller, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'll just I guess I'll finish it with it this way. This is confusing. I will tell you that when I saw this bill, I talked to a local producer who's not big. He's not fully enmeshed in the activities of like current wine groups and stuff like that, but he does know people that is, and he called around and he couldn't find any information on this bill, and he couldn't find information that anyone else knew. So I would encourage you that as this bill moves forward, that there's communication, because if we're going to be growing government with a new council, I would certainly hope the people that are going to benefit from it would know about it. Mr. Chair, I have more questions. So if Representative Haley wants to talk to me later, or Mr. Howe wants to talk to me later, I'm perfectly fine with that. But I have lots of alarms in this, and for the sake of time, I won't take any more of your time. But I'm just concerned about why. I don't understand this. I don't quite get why we're doing this.
Mr. Miller,
Thank you, Representative Miller. Mr. Howe, did you have something further?
Well, just that there's two major groups. There's MNFA and there's the Minnesota Grape Growers Association for people who belong to the wineries. And I think it is an educational project, educational process. I would agree with Representative Miller that we absolutely do have to educate. I think people are shocked to find out that you can ship 2 cases of wine to an address in Minnesota and not be taxed at all on it. And it's only going to grow with internet sales and everything. People are, the people that buy wine understand this. And if you want, Representative Miller, if you want to create a bill that would exempt Minnesota wineries from having to pay sales tax and excise tax, I'd be 100% supportive of that. But if we don't get that done, we need to do something else. And the other part of this bill, that's just one part of this bill. The other part of this bill is about the education promotion and trying to get more grapes growing in Minnesota. And so that's what this is about growing the industry, growing the tourism. And hopefully, you've been to some of the wineries and seen how that economically impacts Minnesota.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Howe. Before we move to Representative Anderson, let's hear from the Ellenbeckers again. I see your hand is up.
So I thank you, Mr. Chair, and Representative Miller. If we have just came back from our conference last weekend, there are 55 members in the Minnesota Grape Growers Association, and of the 35 members in the Minnesota Farm Winery Association, we work very close together. We are in both of them. There are 35 members in that organization. There are roughly or just shy of 80 wineries in the state. So there are a number of small wineries, if they choose not to be involved, they are much smaller businesses. We are in that small medium category. We are a 6,000 case producing winery. We pay $70,000 in taxes annually for this and to the state. So we are a small business, but there are a number of them that are much bigger. And if you want to have a voice, we have these organizations that we get together on a regular annual, semi-annual, quarterly basis for education. We just can't afford to tell the public what we're doing, and we need to get more materials out there so more people have an opportunity to learn and grow.
Okay, thank you. Representative Anderson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to thank Representative Haley for offering this bill. I think what it all boils down to is that this is a matter of fairness. If out-of-state wine is coming into our state, not paying the same taxes that our in-state folks are paying, that is an issue that needs to be addressed and looked at. And so I see this overall mainly as an issue of fairness. I do have a couple of questions or comments This bill would establish the council. How is that going to be different? Or what will they be doing differently from the Minnesota Grape Growers Association? What will be the separation of duties between these two?
To the author or Mr. Hall?
Either one, Mr. Chair.
Either one.
Chairman.
Go ahead, Mr.
Mr.
Hall.
Hall, please.
The organizations like the Grape Growers Association, that's just a separate private association. The Wine Council would be just more like, not exactly, but like Explore Minnesota, where we're educating the public on and giving grants out for people to put more grapes in the ground, to do more viticulture, to do more research. And we have a lot of different grape varieties in Minnesota. We've got, the new grape that the University of Minnesota just came out with is Itasca. We've got Marquette, we've got Frontenac, we've got La Crescent. And so there's a lot of different varieties of grapes. And what we're trying to do is just promote that industry. So it isn't, wouldn't be anything, any forced membership. But if you look at who we're asking to be members of that organization, we're including everybody. We're even including the Minnesota Licensed Beverage Association, the Minnesota Municipal Beverage Association, because we know they have a vested interest in the wine industry too. And so we even encompass having a person from the Minnesota Cider Guild. And that's another industry that needs help with promoting. So it would just help grow our industry, and it's revenue that's not being collected today that should be being collected, because that's part of it, is closing this loophole. And thank you, Representative, for pointing out it really is a fairness issue. Like I said, I could go with Representative Miller and say, let's eliminate the tax for Minnesota wineries, but I don't think that's going to happen. So, the answer is everybody should be paying the same. You should have to have a license, and we should know how many cases of wine are coming into our state direct to consumer shipments.
Thank you, Representative Anderson. You had a follow-up?
Yeah, one more quick question, Mr. Chair, and this kind of gets back to the agriculture part of this. This is a growing industry. I have wineries back in my area. They do a great job. And one thing they've discussed with me is that, we're hearing today about out-of-state folks can import up to 2 cases per person per year in Minnesota. But the same thing is true for our wineries sending wine out of state. I believe they're limited to 2 cases per year. And, in this age of internet sales, to me, that number could be raised to allow our Minnesota folks to compete more. And Mr. Howe mentioned that it could be up to 12 cases coming into the state. So I think, although that's not in this bill, I think we should take a look at increasing the number of cases that folks could import from Minnesota out of state to customers in other parts of the country. And I would like to see that looked at some point in the future, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Anderson. We also have the department on tap here, so seeing no other questions, let's hear from the department briefly to comment on the fiscal note and share the department's perspective on this bill. Is Andrew Valbo available? Okay, Sherry Comstroder or Paul Huguenin?
Mr. Chair, I think the commissioner is on.
Oh, we'll settle for a commissioner then. Commissioner Peterson. You're muted.
I'm sorry, can we restate the question?
Oh, just looking for the department's perspective on the fiscal note and perspective on the bill itself.
Yep, Mr. Chairman and members, supportive of the concept of this. Appreciate Representative Haley and former Representative Howe and bringing this forward. Actually toured the Ellen Becker's impressive winery this summer, and it as stated by others, including Representative Anderson, the wine business continues to grow in Minnesota. It's a very exciting part of agriculture, and so supporting of the concept of this bill and moving it forward. I think the highlight in the bill is that collecting the dollars, putting the grant program together would be highlighted by adding a half an employee or a time of employee was the one part on the fiscal note. And I don't know, Mr. Huguenin worked on it. I don't know if he has any other comments on it, so maybe ask him too as well.
Mr. Huguenin, please.
Mr. Chair, members, for the record, my name is Paul Huguenin, Director of Ag Marketing and Development Division. I echo the commissioner. This would be an exciting bill to work on and to implement. In my role at the department, I've worked with the wine growers and the grape growers in the wine industry for decades. And when I started at the department, there were less than a dozen farm wineries in Minnesota. And now, as you heard the Ellenbeckers testify, there's something like 80. And those that exist have also grown. So tremendous opportunities within this industry. And as a staff person, I'd look forward to working alongside them to implement this.
Thank you, Mr. Huguenin. Are there any questions to the department from the committee? No further questions on the bill. Okay, Representative Haley, any closing comments before Representative Anderson renews his motion and we vote?
Thank you, Chair Sundin, and thanks to the commissioner and the department for their comments. In summary, I mean, as you can see, this industry is growing in Minnesota and is an important part of our ag economy. And that was really my purpose in bringing this forward, as brought to me by my constituent, Mr. Howe, is to support these small businesses that aren't so small anymore and are really thriving, and not only increasing the ag economy, but the tourism economy in Minnesota. So I appreciate the time today to bring more awareness to this issue. And certainly we have additional committee stops to work on this as it goes forward. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you. Representative Anderson renews his motion that House File 2168 as amended be recommended to be referred to the Committee on Commerce, Finance and Policy. Mr. Smith, would you please take the roll?
Chair Sundin.
Aye.
Sundin votes aye. Representative Vang.
Aye.
Vang votes aye. Representative Anderson.
Anderson, aye.
Anderson votes aye. Representative Burkle.
Burkle votes aye.
Burkle votes aye. Representative Eklund.
Aye.
Eklund votes aye. Representative Hanson R.
Hanson R, aye.
Hanson R votes aye. Representative Hanson J.
Hanson J. I.
Hanson J. I. Representative Klevorn.
Klevorn, aye.
Klevorn votes aye. Representative Lippert.
Lippert, aye.
Lippert votes aye. Representative Lewick.
Lewick votes aye.
Lewick votes aye. Representative Miller.
Miller, no.
Miller, no. Representative Nelson.
Nelson, I.
Nelson, aye. Representative Thompson. Representative Thompson. 11 ayes, 1 nay, Mr. Chair.
Okay, there being 11 ayes and 1 nay. You hear that? The motion prevails and House File 2168 is on its way to Commerce Committee. Thank you, Representative Haley. Representative Morrison, you are up next. We have House File 3077 Morrison Pollinator Research Account eligible. It uses modified money transfer. Okay, we have about 15 minutes blocked for this bill. I will move House File 3077 to be laid over for possible inclusion in the supplemental finance bill. Get it before the committee. Representative Morrison, welcome to the committee. Please tell us about your bill.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, members, thank you for the opportunity to present House File 3077, a bill to modify, extend, and provide additional funding to the Pollinator Habitat and Research Account established by the 2017 legislature. It would extend the account's expiration date to July 1st of 2025 from July 1st of this coming year, or this year, 2022. It would remove the word habitat from the account's name and would appropriate $2.5 million to the account. It would also establish additional eligible uses to include how pesticides, parasites, and climate disruption impact pollinators. I'm grateful to have bipartisan support in both the House and Senate for this bill. I think that reflects the increasing understanding of the importance that pollinators play in our world and the crisis that they face. Ensuring that we have adequate funding to pursue research that will expand that knowledge so that we can establish science-based best practices is critical. And I do have several testifiers today, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Will the testifiers please identify themselves for the record and proceed? I see Elaine Evans up first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, committee members. My name is Elaine Evans. I'm at the University of Minnesota. I'm an extension educator in the B Lab at the University of Minnesota. And joining me are Dr. Marla Spivak and Dr. Dan Caravo, and I believe Marla is going to start us off.
Okay, thank you. Please identify yourself and proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee and staff. I appreciate this opportunity. My name is Dr. Marla Spivak, and I'm a professor in the B Lab. We are within the Department of Entomology at the University of Minnesota. And I'm going to start by giving you kind of a general overview of what we do in the B Lab to kind of couch this request. And so in 2016, with state funding, the new bee research facility opened. There's been bee research on the UMN campus for well over 100 years, but this new facility expanded our capacity greatly and our productivity and our ability to promote pollinators and change. So there are now up to, in the summers, up to 40 people working within the facility, and we're continually expanding our research and educational programming. Our mission is to promote the conservation, health, and diversity of bee pollinators through research, education, and hands-on mentorship. So the Bee Lab houses 2 research professors, 2 research programs, and students in the support staff of my students and then of Dr. Dan Caravo, who will speak after me. My research focuses on honeybees, specifically their genetic behaviors and strategies they use to keep themselves healthy. So I work on honeybee health and breeding. So we're breeding bees that are more resistant to parasites and viruses that are affecting their health and the entire beekeeping industry, which is quite large in Minnesota. Dr. Caravo's research is on native bee ecology, on all the wild pollinators that abound in our state. And within the Bee Lab, we have 2 extension educators, Dr. Elaine Evans, who you just heard from, who will speak at the end, and then Dr. Katie Lee, and they run state and regional educational programs on wild bees, bumblebees, honeybees, and pollinator habitat. And finally, within the lab, we have the Bee Squad, which is the outreach arm of the Bee Lab, and it employs 8 to 10 people. The Bee Squad's known for its really creative programming, and it provides this educational interface between the university and the public on why and how to protect and promote all of our pollinators. All of us within the Bee Lab interact with state agencies of Minnesota on their numerous pollinator initiatives. So that's just a broad overview, and I'm going to hand this over to Dr. Caravo, who will explain how previous state allocated funds were used on a large collaborative project that involves everybody in the lab. Thank you, everybody.
Welcome to the committee, Doctor. Please identify yourself for the record. Proceed with your testimony.
My name is Dr. Dan Caravo. I'm an associate professor in entomology. I work at the Bee Lab with Dr. Spivak and Dr. Evans. And I want to thank you, Mr. Chair, and the committee for the opportunity as well. So as Dr. Spivak mentioned, these funds from 2017 were used to start a research project that we call the Minnesota Agriculture for Pollinators Project. You always have to have an acronym, right? So it's called MAP is what we call it. And what this is, this funding, and I was able to leverage some funds from the United States Department of Agriculture to launch a big project to put in pollinator habitat in Southwest Minnesota. We installed about 300 acres of pollinator habitat, mostly on private land in where people were growing from corn and soy growers. And the habitat, this project really allows us to do a long-term research on native bee diversity in bumblebees, and then honeybee health and honey production, and look at how these different seed mixes are going to affect different bee species. In addition to that, it's not a pollinator thing, but we're actually also looking at kind of these other good insects that eat the pests of crop pests. So these are predatory insects. We're seeing how the habitat might affect those. it's a really unique study in that it's very novel and that we're testing all these different aspects in one particular study. And we are also looking at the economics of this. So how do you do this in terms of how do you make it economically feasible to do it? And there's, as I mentioned, there's also a large honeybee component. So we're looking at honeybees and honey production, which is incredibly important to Minnesota agriculture, as are bees in particular. There's been findings that bees are important for pollination of soy in a lot of instances. This project has been a really big success in a number of different ways. One of the things that's been exciting about it is it's already led to a lot of outreach. So to simply get the project going, we needed to work with a lot of farmers to see if they were interested in putting some of their land into pollinator habitat. And we had an incredible outpouring of support. We actually had to turn people away, which was too bad, but a really nice problem to have in a sense of there was so much interest in Southwest Minnesota to really do this work. So right now we're compiling our data from 2021. We had a bit of a hiccup with 2020 and this thing called COVID, but we're looking forward to kind of getting those results together. So one of the things that would be helpful for these funds going forward that we end up using is we're coming up on our third and final season of data collection, but a lot of this habitat, it takes 3 to 5 years for it to become mature. It takes a while for it to become mature. So while we've collected a lot of really rigorous data so far, we would, more funding would allow us to do more long-term studies on this type of habitat. And so certain types of questions that we'd be really interested in asking is there a competition among different bee species for different types of floral uses? Are pathogens, we know that disease is a big problem in honeybees and native bees. So we're interested to know if pathogen spillover might occur among bees that forage on those same crops. We're also looking at whether increasing floral habitat might help ameliorate some of the impacts of pathogens on our honeybees and our native pollinators as well. So we really are glad to have some support from the legislature in the past and look forward to potentially more in the future. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Evans.
Thank you, Elaine Evans, again from the University of Minnesota Bee Lab Extension Educator. And I wanted to talk about the importance of outreach. So to make a difference for pollinators and for people, it's really important that we have this strong, groundbreaking research. But the Bee Lab is also strongly committed to sharing that knowledge through action steps, best management practices that will be accessible to people across Minnesota. For example, with the Minnesota Agriculture for Pollinators project, once we have all of these data from this incredibly designed study, we want to be able to share that broadly with farmers and landowners so that they can realize the benefits and the economics of installing pollinator habitat. Minnesotans' awareness of pollinator conservation has been increasing with the listing of the rusty patch bumblebee as a federally endangered species and its designation as our Minnesota state bee. This public demand for information about how to help pollinators has just been continuing to increase. We've had more ideas for programs to expand our outreach efforts than we have time or resources. So financial support to make that happen would really have benefits for people and pollinators across Minnesota. In conclusion, there's a lot of energy and knowledge that we have here in the Bee Lab at the University of Minnesota. We're really excited about new and expanded research and educational programs that we could create to provide this information across Minnesota with additional legislative support. So the past support from the legislature has enabled us to expand and grow to help Minnesotans help pollinators. The continued support with House File 3077 would help us gain new insights, reach new audiences, and move towards an even more pollinator-friendly future for Minnesota.
To thank the testifiers, we'll move on to some questions here. Representative Anderson, please.
Mr. Chair, I had a couple of amendments. We should have looked at those before we do questions. So, yeah.
Sorry, I missed that. Okay. Okay, there's an author's amendment, I guess. Would you like to move the A1 amendment for Representative Haley?
Mr. Chair,
Hello.
Representative Anderson has two amendments.
Yes, we're just referring to the A1,
It's his amendment. It's not the author's amendment,
oh,
Mr. Chair.
okay, I'm sorry. Representative Anderson, to your amendment.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, we're hearing some good things, some exciting things about research, the habitat for bees. But I have a question for the bill author. You open it up to some additional areas of study of pesticides, parasites, and the climate disruptions on line 111 of your bill, but back up on line 110, you add the words, but not limited to. Well, to me, that kind of muddies the water if you're going to state specifically what this is going to go for, but then add but not limited to. To me, it really takes away the meaning of what you're trying to do. So my amendment would strike those words on line 110 and just to keep the focus of the bill on those specific things mentioned on line 111, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any comments from Representative Haley, please?
Representative Sundin, I think you are on the wrong, I think you missed a page. We're on Representative Morrison.
Oh, boy, I'm screwed up there. Sorry. What page are
And
we
then
on here?
Representative Anderson, you've got two amendments, and it would be helpful if you moved one or the other. You didn't specify what you were moving.
Okay, my apologies, Nancy. I would move the A1 amendment to make those changes on line 110 and 111 of Representative Morrison's bill.
Okay. 2, 3. I'm gonna get this right by the end of the committee anyway, so. The A1 amendment, any questions, comments on the A111? A1, yeah.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, I appreciate Representative Anderson's comments. I would recommend a no vote on this amendment. The point is to not limit the scope of research, which is sort of counter to the scientific method. We want to make sure that these researchers have academic freedom without interference from the legislature. So I would recommend a no on this amendment.
Okay, any further comments on the amendment? All those in favor of the amendment say aye.
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 Those opposed say no.
No.
No. I think the noes have it. That's the A1. Representative Anderson, you have an A2 amendment?
Yes, I do, Mr. Chair. Thank you. And I anticipate the same fate to this one, because this one is even more restrictive than my first one. You know, this bill has some history going back to 2017. It was kind of a compromise with Governor Dayton and the ag folks dealing with treated seed, things like that. And this got started with some general fund money and also money from LCCMR with the specific intent to focus on habitat. And, you know, I really enjoyed the testimony from Dr. Caribou, who talked about this could take up to 5 years. They had kind of a hiccup with COVID, and Dr. Evans saying that they really need to do more outreach, BMPs, in terms of the habitat portion of this. So my A2 amendment would delete some of the language and put it back in the original form, and to focus this study strictly on habitat, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Anderson. Any guidance, comments on the A2?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Representative Anderson, you're right. I will have a similar response. We want to broaden the scope of our researchers' ability to pursue their research. And And it's important that pollinators are at the center of that. So I would recommend a no vote on this amendment.
Okay, any questions, comments on that second amendment? Representative Anderson?
No, Mr. Chair, I don't.
Okay, thank you. Okay, seeing no other discussion on this, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Oh, okay, the noes have it. That motion fails as well. So does not prevail. That amendment is not adopted. Neither of them were. There being no further amendments, any additional questions or comments on the bill? Okay, Representative Anderson, please.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. I'll be brief here. And, you know, this was put into effect in 2017 and is coming up to the end of the current expiration date here in July. And I have not seen any report that's been put out by this study. And usually before we extend a program and add additional funding, we get some kind of report from the folks doing the research and what they've done, what they're looking at doing. And as far as I know, this was not in the university's budget request. So just concerned about the need for this without having any data or report about what the folks have done so far. So that's my concern with this bill, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Representative Lewick, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just a question for the bill author. Normally, you know, we've heard some discussion about the honey industry in Minnesota. Have you discussed how much skin they've got in the game and how much that industry is funding the University of Minnesota with the industry?
Representative Morrison, please.
Mr. Chair and Representative Lewick, I do not know the answer to that question. Perhaps someone from the B Lab does.
Yes, this is Marla Spivak.
Marla Spivak, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There is a Minnesota Honey Producers Association, and they, until the last year, because of their revenue comes from the state fair, and traditionally they've been donating $10,000 to $12,000 per year for research on honeybees, but not in the last year. The hobby group give about $1,000 or $2,000 a year. So there's really there's no industry support, or very little industry support, although we're very thankful for that, what we get from them.
Okay, Representative Lewick, anything further?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, as I suspected, you know, I guess, and this is something that the researchers may want to think about in your world. If you have to make a choice, because you've got pretty widespread there, and you had a finite amount of money, what are you going to do? Are you going to do research on the health of bees? Are you going to go out and do habitat? I see this as without these little bit of control here, this has got to be the sweetest deal I've ever seen handed to the University of Minnesota, on no limitations on what you decide to do, and been around here for a while, and I've watched that with the best of intentions. You know, you have to remember, this is taxpayer money. This isn't even coming from the industry directly, who obviously have a huge stake in the health of our pollinators. So I just I can't support this, and I have had bees on my property for years, in the alfalfa fields and that type of thing. So I get it, but this just looks like a recipe to just kind of go out there and employ a lot more people. But you need to be a little more focused, and I would expect, as Representative Anderson alluded to, we would at least have some clue exactly what has been done with the dollars that have been spent so far. So I think we need to be just a little more accountable to the taxpayers here, and you know, appreciate what the B Lab is doing, but this just looks like a blank check. So we got to be a little more conservative with people's money. So again, Mr. Chair, I certainly can't support this as it's written.
Okay, any further comments to the author or professionals? Okay, any closing comments, Representative Morrison, before I lay this bill over?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to present House File 3077 and for your consideration, including it in the supplemental finance bill. We all have a stake in the health of our pollinators. And I'm so grateful for the work that the Bee Lab does, and we all should be. We need to address the crisis of our pollinator population for all of our well-being. Thank you very much.
Okay, with that, 3077 is laid over. Okay, the next two bills deal with Forever Green. Representative Klevorn, you are up, and we're running up against the clock, so I'm gonna require people to be concise with their questions and answers. Thank you. Representative Klevorn, House File 3625.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. I move that House File 3625 be laid over for possible inclusion in the committee supplemental finance bill.
Okay, go ahead with the explanation and your testifiers, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This bill is a $20 million one-time general fund appropriation to the Commissioner of Agriculture for grants to the University of Minnesota to fund the Forever Green Agricultural Initiative. The initiative protects the state's natural resources while increasing efficiency, profitability, and productivity of Minnesota farmers by incorporating perennial and winter annual crops into existing agricultural practices. The bill expressly states that $5 million is to be used for equipment and physical infrastructure to support the breeding and agronomic activities necessary to develop perennial and winter annual crops. Members, today in your packet, I just want to call your attention, and for the public, you'll find them online. There is a detailed explanation of the infrastructure needs and associated cost. There is proposed annual funding model for the Forever Green Initiative crop platforms by category, and you will also find personnel and fixed costs by crop. You will also find letters of support from the Land Stewardship Project, the Minnesota Farmers Union, and a joint letter of support signed by 37 organizations. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'll ask that we just move on to our testifiers. Thank you.
Yes, please. Mr. Weiss, Don Weiss, identify yourself and proceed. Or not. There, Mr. Don Weiss from the university.
Dr. Wise needs to unmute and prepare to share a screen. Thank you.
Dr. Weiss, please. You're still unmuted. You're still muted.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Committee members. I'm Don Wise. I'm a faculty member at the University of Minnesota, and I'm also the co-director of the Forever Green initiative. And I'd like to share my screen if I could. Is that visible?
Yes.
Is it full screen?
It's full enough for me. Please continue. We're under a time crunch here.
I understand. So the Forever Green initiative has been under development for over 20 years, and it's designed to basically develop winter annual and perennial crops, providing continuous living cover on the landscape to diversify the food, feed, and energy systems, and provide new economic opportunities for farmers in rural Minnesota while providing protection of the natural resource base. And I just thought I would give you this visual of the current cover on the Minnesota landscape in the Midwest, starting in April, and you can see the brown. So what we're basically trying to do is develop cropping systems that cover that brown period throughout the spring. And then you can see the cover starts in June, and then we go into August, into July and August. And then by September, it's brown again. So we're trying to figure out how to extend the area of green cover on the landscape from 3 months to up to 6 to 7 months per year. And this basically shows the advances that we've made, the development of Kernza, the first perennial grain in the world, showing you the fall cover, providing that green cover as compared to a tilled field. And then in the spring with camelina, that started in the fall, compared to a conventional field being prepared. But if we want to have that cover on the landscape, there has to be an economic pull. So all of the crops that we're developing are focused on an end product from oil, fiber, protein, and a wide range of other products. So the market that's under development for each of those, high value food and feed ingredients, green marketing opportunities, innovative health and food products, and as a farm kid, new opportunities for farmers and rural communities. And at the same time, as we get these systems on the landscape, they provide the opportunity to protect soil health, potential soil protection, as well as protecting the rural well water supply. So how do we get these crops out on the landscape? Well, first off, you have to develop them. So a large portion of our research effort and funding from the state and other entities has been focused on the development of these new crops, with funding going into plant breeding and genomics, and followed up with the agronomics and how to produce them, then investment in food science to actually develop the products that can be moved into the marketplace. And then our new team moving through with commercialization and supply chain development. So here are the 16 crops that are under development. All of these platforms are well developed, they're all functioning and ready for advanced investment to move these crops out into commercial production. So we have the perennial crops, the winter annuals, and then the native woody crops. We have products in the marketplace. So with the investment from the state of Minnesota, we've been able to develop crops that are not only on the landscape, but they're actually moving into commercial use. So as I look at this and think this through with you, the forever green crops are from research to field to the table. And these are the things that have happened based on the investment from the state of Minnesota and others. One point I want to make out to you, for every $1 million that's invested by the state historically, these teams have been able to generate another 5 million. So the base funding is really important, but the teams have been able to generate additional funds to support the program. And so we now have the 16 platforms in place, with this as an example of an outcome. The Minnesota Clearwater variety was the first perennial grain to be released in the world. So the new investment basically is focused on continuing to advance the activity of these teams. And we project over the next 5 years, this is a list of the outcomes that we anticipate over the next 5 years. You have this information in your handout, and I won't go through it in great detail, but this is where the investments would go across food science, and then investments in each of the crop development platforms. And this is where the money would go within those platforms. Funding for non-tenure track faculty, postdocs, graduate students, technical support, and undergraduate labor. So I will stop there and pass it along. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up, some brief comments from Mr. Ben Penner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. My name is Ben Penner, and I'm a Kernza grower and farmer and the vice president of the Perennial Promise Growers Cooperative, representing 24 early adopter members and approximately 1,000 acres of Kernza, mostly in Minnesota. And I'm here to register my strong support for this bill and the Forever Green Initiative. As a farmer and an entrepreneur, we are faced with the twin challenges of innovating and pushing ourselves to respond to challenges, both the everyday variety, such as getting our grain to market and the weather, and the more strategic challenges, such as how do we produce food in such a way as to conserve and protect the environment that we all love and depend on profitably, and in such a way that we can continue the strong legacy of agricultural practice and leadership that we've come to depend on here in the upper Midwest. The bill in front of you and the strong work that has already gone into the Forever Green Initiative is a rare opportunity to respond to both varieties of challenges all at once. With your support, together we can create new opportunities for farmers, entrepreneurs, businesses, while achieving our economic and environmental goals through a market-based solution and a suite of forward-looking crops. If there ever was a win-win, this is it. Specifically, as a Kernza grower, we have a tremendous opportunity to create economic opportunities for farmers and entrepreneurs for in-demand products, as well as a new addition to the rotation. So I envision a world where local farmers in my home county and all over the state can grow a new profitable suite of Forever Green Initiative crops on their land and to add to their already successful rotation with germplasm developed in Minnesota, using their already existing equipment to plant and harvest and transport the grain and feed to ready, profitable market hubs, such as one I'd like to see in our area. So with your support, this bill will get us a long way towards many of our goals. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Penner. Next up, we have Richard Magnuson. Please identify yourself and continue with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, for the opportunity to testify today. I'm Richard Magnuson. I farm near Rosa, Minnesota. I would like to lend my support for funding the Forever Green Initiative. This initiative has potential for improving both economic and environmental opportunities for farmers in Minnesota. Farmers in Northwest Minnesota have benefited greatly from a cooperative effort with the University of Minnesota to develop new crops and markets for them. An example of this is perennial ryegrass seed production. Prior to 2000, there was almost no acres perennial ryegrass grown in northern Minnesota. The University of Minnesota worked on varietal development, management techniques, and help with market development, and that crop is now grown to over 50,000 acres and is one of the most profitable crops in growers' rotation in northern Minnesota. Beyond the economic impacts for growers, it also provides environmental benefits with growing cover on the fields during both the fall and spring time periods. This is a forever green crop before Forever Green was started, but the goals are the same. Economics is what pulls producers into growing it, and you get the added environmental benefits. Perennial ryegrass and future Forever Green crops have the multiple positive impacts for both economics for growers and the environment. I encourage the Forever Green funding for the Forever Green initiative to develop these new crops. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, thank you, Mr. Magnuson. Next up to testify is Dr. Nicole Atchison. If you can keep your comments to about a minute or so, that'd be appreciated.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. My name is Nicole Atchison. I'm the CEO of Purist Holdings, a Minnesota-based plant-based food company. We've talked a lot about the on-farm, but I also want to mention the economic impacts on the CPG side, or consumer packaged goods. Consumer packaged goods are increasingly marketing environmental and sustainability advantages to gain momentum in the market. The Forever Green Initiative crops really do fit squarely in this model that food manufacturers are looking for in order to meet consumer needs. Crops that deliver nutrition while improving soil and water quality can drive a premium on the market if their story of production is transparent. My family's company, Purist, proves as an example of sustainable food and agriculture model in action. We have commercialized pea protein from yellow field peas. Over the last 20 years, we've invested in our private business. We've invested in breeding, production, processing infrastructure, and market development of field peas and pea protein. In 2021, we were excited to commission our second pea protein processing facility in Dawson, Minnesota. This is in District 16, which brought between 90 and 100 jobs to the community And we've also increased the number of acres of yellow field peas to the hundreds of thousands to support our model. Peas are just an example of crops that can add diversity, soil and water health improvements to Minnesota farmers. The Forever Green Initiative is spearheading the development of other crops that have the same potential to transform the economic output of Minnesota farmland by delivering sustainable nutrition. The investment into the connections between farmers, manufacturers, and brands is critical for the success of a new crop. We all know that simply growing a crop doesn't equal success. We need a thriving supply chain that can transform the crop into its final form, whether that be feed, food, or fuel. And we need to create more value per acre to get there. Forever Green understands this and is considering the holistic success of the crop in its efforts by including processing and market development, which is critical for the adoption of these crops. Thank you.
Okay, next up, we have Hannah Stoll, a graduate student.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Identify yourself for the record and continue.
Will do. Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. My name is Hannah Stahl, and I'm a PhD student studying intermediate wheatgrass, or Kernza, breeding and genetics at the University of Minnesota. And today I'm representing a group of graduate students working across food science, genomics, breeding, soil science, and agronomy in the Forever Green Initiative program. And today I'd like to tell you a bit about who I am and why I even chose to study at the University of Minnesota for my PhD over several other programs. I'm originally from Central Illinois, and I did my undergraduate degree at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. And after having other opportunities to complete my PhD at other top schools in the US, it was because of this project, the Forever Green Initiative, that I chose to come study at the University of Minnesota. No other state in the US has any initiative quite like Forever Green. I was drawn in because of the outstanding program and the world-renowned faculty that the University of Minnesota has for plant breeding and genetics, and also because I believe in the future of a more environmentally sustainable agriculture. But as someone who comes from an ag background and a rural area, I also understand the importance of having a cropping system that is economically sustainable for both the farmer and the communities that they support. And that's exactly what the Forever Green Initiative is doing with the development of these new crops and cropping systems. So that's why I'm here and why this work is important to me. As a PhD student in plant breeding, I understand that there are challenges to bringing these new crops to market, but with your support, scientists and students like myself can work on these breeding, agronomic, and food science challenges to bring forth a more environmentally and economically sustainable future in ag. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for your input here today. We have one question up, Representative Miller, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I do promise to be brief. Dr. Weiss, it's good to see you probably one final time. I'm retiring. You're not. I kind of thought you might retire before me, but people are probably happier that it's the other way around.
Mr. Chair, a lot of people are hoping that.
Not me.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss.
Not me. I will tell you though. Well, maybe waiting for me. But anyway, Dr. Weiss continues to say something that really is important in this whole linchpin for me, because I very much support the Forever Green program, and that sometimes surprises people. I'm convinced that under Dr. Weiss, he says that it needs to make economic sense. And the testifiers you heard today are making this economic sense. I reel when we talk about the term making an investment. We do that all the time. Dr. Weiss and his program has proven that the money that is put into this actually is returning. You know, when we think of ag coming out of Minnesota, I just jotted two: the Honeycrisp apple, there's cold hardy grapes. I'm sure there's other things that we've done that have advanced the market very much in agriculture. What Dr. Weiss is doing that with certain crops. There's still some things to be figured out yet, but I just wanted to officially say in front of Dr. Weiss one more time, he's been a really good guy, and I do support this program.
Thank you. Representative Burkle, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll make this quick. I'm just, as a new member, trying to get a sense of the money, and we're talking $20 million here. How does this differ from the ag special budget? And maybe this is for the author of the bill, or I don't know who can answer it. It's really a new member thing more than anything. But you know, the entire rest of agriculture in the ag special budget gets what, $40 million, over 40? How does this differ from that?
Who wants to tackle that one?
I'll take it. Thank you, Chair Sundin. And Representative Burkle, I think your question's a good one. Because we are talking about a one-time appropriation, the ag specials are generally ongoing, and they're through higher education, and this is going through the Commissioner of Ag.
Okay, thank you. Is that it?
Yeah,
Representative
nothing
Urkel?
further, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Representative Anderson, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'll be quick. Comment of Dr. Weiss said, if we're getting a fivefold increase from public money, we have invested in the last 3 bienniums nearly $10 million from the legacy funding into Forever Green. So if that's going to be increased 5 times, that's about $50 million. That's a hefty sum. And just a quick question for, I believe, Mr. Penner. I believe he said he raised pennycress. And, we're talking about profitability. There has to be a way for these crops to make money. We'd just like to have him touch, if he could, for a second on how his crop yielded last year and was it profitable?
Mr. Penner, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the question. Yeah, it was my first year crop and it was Kernza. I grew intermediate wheatgrass Kernza for the first time, and the yield was a little below average on my land. And we're just organizing our marketing cooperative to get the final product out into the marketplace. And so it should be profitable at the prices that we're aiming for.
Representative Anderson?
No, that answered my question. Good luck with it, and hope it is profitable for him.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Hang on a second. Mr. Weiss.
Yeah, I just want to say, I think there was maybe a misunderstanding about the fivefold. The fivefold, so for the $1 million, each $1 million invested from the legacy funds, what I was saying was that our teams were able to go out based on that base investment and bring in additional $5 million for each $1 million from federal dollars, foundation dollars, and industrial dollars. And so
Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Klevorn, would you like to renew your motion?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just renew my motion to ask that this bill please be laid over for inclusion in our final committee finance bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Klevorn. House File 3625 is laid over. Our last bill is going to be sound more like an auction here, but we're going to get through it. House File 2720, Representative Lippert, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move House File 2720 be laid over for possible inclusion.
You have an amendment?
I do. I also move the A2 author's amendment.
Okay, explain the A2, please.
It allocates $10 million for this bill and then makes the funds available until June 30th of 2027.
Super. Any questions on the A2 from the committee? Representative Anderson, you have your hand up. But we still can't hear you.
Yeah, I forgot to take it down, but yeah, I've always got a question. Thanks, Mr. Chair. This bill seems like it needs more work, and I agree that we need work on the supply chains and that type of thing, but it's pretty vague, pretty broad. Grants to organizations. I think as this moves ahead, and here they're also talking about research into Kernza. We just heard about that in the previous bill. And so I'd like to see this a little bit more tied down, if you will, in terms of where this funding would go before I could support it. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Okay, there's to the A2, any other questions, comments? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, please say nay. Okay, the ayes have it. The bill as amended is before us. Representative Lippert, if you can ask your testifiers to be brief, we'll get through this. The testifiers, Colin Kirton, please identify yourself and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. My name is Colin Kirton, and I work as the Director of Adoption and Scaling for the U of M Forever Green Initiative. Thank you for the opportunity to provide some context for this bill. I have a few short minutes of prepared comments and hear from several stakeholders. As you heard in the last bill, Forever Green develops the basic science of continuous living cover crops. These R&D activities are what you could call the invention arm of Forever Green. I co-lead the team that focuses on the launch, adoption, and scaling of these crops in partnership with the food and agricultural sector. I call this the innovation arm of Forever Green. Technically speaking, innovation is the process by which inventions find footing in the world as viable and scalable solutions. I'm pleased to present to you today with innovators that are taking these crops to market, innovating new products, equipment, businesses, and markets along the way. They come here today to ask you to invest in scaling up homegrown innovation for the long-term future of Minnesota communities and natural resources. Notably, some of these systems are developed by us at the university. Some are developed by indigenous and immigrant communities that have long practiced continuous living cover agriculture, and both deserve support. Continuous living cover will be economically significant for Minnesota. These are real crops to develop real products, to meet real demand from industry and consumers for products that address the challenges of the 21st century. Beyond the economics, you heard that these crops will drive water quality, soil health, climate resilience, and rural vitality. Because these industries also deliver important public goods, the public has a role in accelerating their early value chains and markets for these crops. Named in this bill are value chain investments for Kernza perennial grain, regenerative poultry, winter camelina, and elderberry. All four are profitable options for producers that will keep continuous living cover on the landscape, achieving the many outcomes you heard about today. Based on what I know about the status, economics, and growth trajectory of all four crops and systems named in this bill, I believe that with this investment, value chains for all four are poised to scale volume and economic impact at least tenfold in the next 5 years. Roughly estimate that all four together have a current early footprint of about $5 million. And I believe that easily in the next 5 years, we're going to take that to $50 million in wholesale and retail sales. Since you won't be hearing from a winter camelina stakeholder directly today due to limited time, I will briefly summarize that Forever Green has been working with Minnesota's largest food and agricultural businesses through the Embold partnership to develop camelina-based food, feed, and industrial products. Those companies have named the cash cover crop winter camelina as one of 3 major opportunities to meet their shared business and sustainability goals. Camelina is now on about 10,000 acres of cover crops in the upper Midwest and fewer but closely watched acres of pilot commercial production. This investment will be the nudge that entrepreneurs circling this opportunity need to take the plunge, acting as the catalyst to support the scaling of early supply to meet demand for high quality, consistent supply of this and other climate smart commodities. I would like to pass the mic to several of the entrepreneurs and innovators that are taking these continuous living cover crops and systems to market. Thank you for considering investment in Minnesotan innovators and their businesses.
I see Mr. Christopher Abbott from Perennial Pantry. Please state your name and title and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. My name is Christopher Abbott. I'm the founder of Perennial Pantry, a Kernza processor and food brand based in Burnsville. We buy bin-run Kernza directly from farmers and turn it into grain, flour, baking mixes, and crackers available in grocery stores and online. We've shipped Minnesota-grown Kernza to all 50 states and are nationally the leading Kernza brand. I believe in Kernza and what it can deliver to small towns and farmers across Minnesota. We strongly support this bill because today we have the incredible opportunity to reimagine the future of agriculture and put Minnesota at the forefront of that future. Thanks to previous state investment in Forever Green and visionary land grant research, we have new technologies that can financially benefit farmers, improve soil quality, and bring economic opportunity to rural communities. We are a growing startup and public benefit corporation committed to scaling continuous living cover crops on the Minnesota landscape. We manufacture our own processing equipment, perform applied food science research, continuously develop new products, and communicate the value of Kernza to the public. Our small business processes hundreds of pounds of Kernza a week, but with this investment, we can scale up our systems, expand our capabilities to process thousands of pounds a day, and bring the benefits of Kernza to more communities. A $1.5 million public investment in Kernza value chains would double the current Minnesota Kernza acreage over the next 3 years. Growers would have lower input costs with 330,000 fewer pounds of nitrogen applied to their fields. Kernza will use that nitrogen and prevent runoff, resulting in 270,000 fewer pounds of nitrogen leaching into our watersheds. The crop will also build soil and prevent the erosion of 24,000 tons of topsoil. State investment today will accelerate the market of tomorrow with $13 million of projected retail sales over this time period. Specifically, this investment would enable scaling up our existing processing facility and systems. It will create jobs and benefit rural communities. We'd increase our manufacturing capacity to create ready-to-eat Kernza products, thus expanding Kernza's market base. We would grow our team's marketing and sales capacity. We need bigger seed cleaners, more augers, and more salespeople to create sustained market pull that can bring Kernza to life and truly deliver on the compelling public benefits that we all wish to see. Minnesota has always been an agricultural leader, and I firmly believe that these crops represent the future of agriculture, and that Minnesota is uniquely positioned through demonstrated research and commercialization work to determine and lead agriculture into the next century if the state continues to invest in the creation of these new industries. We are a small business with a track record of bringing Kernza to market, and now it's time to scale. We want to do that on Minnesota's behalf. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Next up, we have Mr. Reginaldo Haslett Merqueen from Regenerative Farms. Please take a minute to talk about Regenerative Farms.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, representatives, citizens. My name is Reginaldo Haslett Marroquin. I'm a first-generation Guatemalan immigrant in Minnesota. I'm a regenerative poultry systems founder and farmer based out of 75 acres here in Northfield, Minnesota. I'm also the founder of and executive director of the Regenerative Agriculture Alliance. And I'm a co-founder of Tree Range Farms and the Regenerative Agriculture System specialist trained in Guatemala and finally graduated here in Minnesota. I come representing an ecosystem of Black, Indigenous, and people of color here in Minnesota who have multi-generational farms and also new immigrant families who are seeking to make a home in this state. As an immigrant, I have a lot of challenges to skip everybody else. And as we tried our innovations, meaning involving ourselves with these perennial systems, which are familiar to our cultures where we come from, we find that just as other industries have support to establish the beginning of their sectors, an investment of the state would be very useful in terms of leveling the playing field and also generating capacity to bring these innovations to bear fruits for the state. I have written a longer testimony and interest of and to respect the time allowance that you gave me, I will stop right around there with the final comment that as we develop these systems, we have in the last 10 years invested tremendous amounts of personal capital and intellect that have generated us a national position in the regenerative poultry innovations. Regenerative poultry basically means bringing poultry back into a natural environment that incorporates all of these perennial crops, agroforestry systems that at the end has given us a competitive advantage and that have now allowed us to put this product into the marketplace and to initiate the process of incorporating multiple families, family farms in our southeastern Minnesota region, and is poised now for expansion with support from multiple communities, including the city of Lee that has now adopted our system as one of the key economic development opportunities for the region, among other institutions that we have now secured support from. Support from the state will put this system in a leading position and make Minnesota a really brilliant spot in terms of how we deal with environmental, social, and economic issues that are critical for the future of agriculture and our competitive advantages.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And finally, we have Christopher Patton from Midwest Elderberry Cooperative.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. My name is Christopher Patton. I'm president of Midwest Elderberry Cooperative, a Minnesota-based cooperative with members from California to Virginia. We have 10 Minnesota members. We're an open cooperative, so we work with a lot of other growers. We don't require everything to flow through the cooperative. I've got another 20 Minnesota farmers that are very interested in joining the cooperative and in growing elderberry. We strongly support this bill because most of our farmers are smaller farmers. We are competing with European imports. Over 95% of the imports of elderberry used in American products come from Europe. They have infrastructure established for well over 100 years. We don't really have that. This has grown up from the farmers. We've proven that small-scale farming of 5 acres or less is very profitable. Most of those farmers are producing their own crops, their own value-added products. And there's a strong demand for it because elderberry has about 3 times the nutrient density of blueberries, has a lot of potential benefits, many of them explored at the University of Missouri and research that's been done there. Our goal is to scale this up on a more commercial basis. And that has huge potential because elderberry on average will yield about 4,000 pounds an acre. That's a $10,000 gross value per acre at $2.50 a pound. Europe has over 30,000 acres, plus many thousands of more wild collected elderberries as sources. We have less than 3,000 acres under cultivation in this country. It is already Missouri's #1 berry crop economically, and we can make it the #1 berry crop in Minnesota as well with your help. I really appreciate this time to share this with you. And again, like Reggie, I have more comments that were recorded in advance, and we have tons of information on our website. Thank you.
Okay, thanks to all the testifiers. Again, there's written comments submitted, so please make note of that and absorb them. Members, any questions to those testifying today or the author? Must be a good bill. Okay, thank you, Representative Lippert. Do you have any closing comments on your bill before you renew your motion?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as Representative Klevorn's bill is focusing on the importance of ongoing research, this bill is focusing on the need for support on the commercialization and supply chain side. And we really need to provide this investment now to help these crops scale up in a significant way. And they can really scale up across the upper Midwest. So there's tremendous opportunity here. It's the right time for us to provide this investment. So I thank everyone for their time and consideration of this bill.
Okay, would you like to renew your motion?
I do. I renew my motion that House File 2720 be laid over for possible inclusion in the supplemental finance bill.
As amended.
As amended.
Okay, House File 2720 as amended is laid over. Okay, we're out of things to talk about, so we are adjourned. Thank you.